Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the second episode of ISNAD, Al-Islaah News Announcement and Discussion Channel. In this episode, we plan to discuss and dissect the offer of munadara, mutual debate, and MUBAAHELA, mutual imprecation, that was made by a scholar based in Qom, directed towards the reformists in Canada, the UK, India, and wherever else they might be. May I reiterate that rather than reform, Al-Islaah is about reviving the original Islam before it got tainted and disintegrated into factions, and also facilitating a return back to the original school of Ahlul Bayt before it got badly hijacked by the Gulat. In the panel in this episode consists of several scholars from around the globe. It is nice to see that there's a united front of thoughts with a clear vision on what needs to be rekindled, or rather, how would you say it? Revived, rekindled and revived. Unlike other scholars who occasionally cannot come to a consensus about things that they use a single source to try and determine. I guess you understood that. My first question, and I would like some input from the panel, and this is, so a traditional scholar based in Qom has been eagerly calling for an engagement.
دوستان اگر مانیتور من را بزرگواری کنن، این خبرگزاری رسمی حوزه علمیه قم هست. درخواست فدراسیون جهانی شیعیان اثنی عشره خوجه که اینا عمدتاً اهل هندوستان هستند و در شهرهای مختلف در اروپا، آمریکا، برای شما عرض کنم مالزی و غیره منتشر هستند. از آیت الله العظمی سبحانی درخواستی کردند که ما امروز مطرح کردیم. امروز یکی از مسئولینشون هم بعد از ظهر با من تماس داشتند.
With those whom he labels as reformists.
خب شما ببینید، میگه اخیراً یک جریانی مدعی اصلاح تشیع. ببینید.
He's promising to cover accommodation and air travel for wherever the scholar or the scholars are.
ولذا ما این آقایان رو دعوت میکنیم برای مناظره. رسما دارم عرض میکنم اینجا، آقایان به گوششون برسانن ما حاضریم هزینه ایاب ذهابشون رو، حالا در تانزانیا هستن، در هر کجا هستن، در هند، در کانادا، در لندن، هزینه ایاب ذهابشون رو ما میدیم، هزینه اسکان غذاشون رو ما میدیم.
So this looks like a good and healthy sign in the right direction coming from Qom. So would you have, who would you have in mind in terms of who should be nominated? Any inputs?
So maybe if I could take that question first. I hope my voice is coming through fine.
Yes.
I think it's a good sign that a proposal has been put forward, and I think people need to react in this way more often, because at the end of the day we are all one big family, and within a family, all the time you can have disagreements about things, and it's not about having disagreements. Having disagreements is normal and natural. What makes a family a strong family is how you're able to manage those disagreements in an amicable way, in a way that has decorum, in a way that is ba'akhlaq. So that is the important thing. So it's good that people are starting to talk about dialogue. Al-Islaah has been talking about dialogue for a long time. We have been wanting to have dialogue with anyone and everyone, as long as we can meet those basic requirements of decorum and akhlaq, and being focused on that which is important, and not being focused on side issues, or trying to take matters away from the academic part of it into more social political aspects and sociological aspects of community life and people feeling threatened and that kind of thing. So as long as all those things can be maintained, there are many ways to have dialogue. And in the modern time, we have a lot of technology that can be used. Why should we have people take so much time away from their families especially people who are working class people. They have to go to work, they have families with which they have to deal with. Why take all that time and resources away to go and have some discussion behind closed doors or secluded in a particular location? Have it set up so we could have it on Zoom, we could have it on video conference, and discuss these matters. So yeah, I believe that the direction is good, but there are better ways of implementing than the traditional old style way of having long journeys to do something that can be done so fast and so swiftly without putting pressure on people.
Thank you for that, Sayyid Ali Haidar. Sayyid Kamran.
Yeah, I just wanted to build upon Sayyid Ali Haidar's point of the nature of the dialogue that they've proposed. I think it's like a debate, like it's just like they challenge us to a debate over something that, we're just making YouTube videos, we're proposing our, new ideas and trying to revive the traditional school of Alabad. And, we're living in a day and age where like YouTube videos, YouTube responses, this type of content appeals to more people. It reaches more people and it allows people to digest the information in a way that's more comfortable to them compared to like a traditional debate. And, traditional debate has its own limitations. Like it has time constraints. People will feel like something was not moderated correctly, or, there's a lot of issues that comes with traditional debates. So I feel like, people, we've gotten a lot of feedback of like, oh, why is Islaah not responding to this debate? Or why, are people running away? Are they scared? I think people put a lot of weight on like the traditional debate. It's almost like, asking someone to come for a fight almost, it's like an intellectual fight. And if you say no, it's like, or if you don't respond, it's like everyone makes a big deal out of it. But, it's much better for, intellectual discourse if people could just respond, in their own responses over Zoom, like Sayyid Ali Haidar mentioned, or, if they could make their own responses, they won't have any restrictions. They won't have any time limit. They can present it just how they want to present it. No one will, like control them. And then we can provide our own responses the way we want it. And then people can watch both responses and they can, they can decide on what they think is right. And just like the logistical, like kind of issues of physical traditional debate, like I previously mentioned, people have to internationally fly. It's like it's not the right time to do that kind of thing right now. And there's a lot of time constraints, and it's just, there's a lot of valid reasons to not like go forth with a traditional debate immediately. And it's not because of like, oh, we're scared or we don't have a response. It's just, there are much better ways to go about this.
Right. Thank you for that. Let me try and look at it in a different sort of format. And, like in this particular video, I'm going to name him, but try and make me understand this, okay? So Ayatullah Sayyid Hussein Kazvini says at the very beginning of his call for MUBAAHELA video, that a person who has logical arguments isn't afraid of debate. People who don't have logical arguments are afraid of debate. So what is he trying to get at? I mean, can this be sort of clarified?
I wanted to contribute some input, if I have the permission of the moderator.
Yes, please.
Right. So when this offer was presented to us here, I have actually submitted a nomination to the Islaah admins previously, and if we have them here, perhaps they can showcase it for the viewers. Have a nomination which is right. So that's the nomination of a scholar for the Munazara / MUBAAHELA. What we are basically suggesting is a very cost-effective solution, and which makes me wonder, why is it that they have not considered this particular option? Either they're unaware of it, or ignorant of it, which would be surprising, because this is a very high-profile scholar, Ayatullah Shaykh Muhammad Hadi Yusuf al-Gharawi. He's based in Qum itself, although he was born in Najaf al-Ashraf in the year 1368 AH, 1948 CE. He studied in the Hawza of Najaf under the Grand Masters, Ayatollah Sayyid al-Qasim al-Khuy, Ayatollah al-Uzma Sayyid Ruhullah al-Khomeini. He attended Bahth al-Kharij under them. He was forced to migrate to Iran due to the Ba'athist regime. And he continued his advanced level studies under Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Sadiq al-Ruhani and Ayatollah Kadhim al-Hussein al-Ha'iri. He has taught in both the Hawzat of Najaf and Qum, and after the Islamic Revolution of Iran, he taught in the Hujjatiyya Seminary in Qum, and then in the Imam Khomeini Seminary, in Al-Madrasa al-Rabawiyya. If we can go to the next slide. Yeah, and here is his opinion about Du'a Tawassul, for example, which is one of the main issues on which the scholar was wanting to engage.
حالا یک ایده‌ام پیدا شدن اصلاحگران تشیع که اینا در میان قشر تحصیل کرده به راه افتادن با استناد به افکار بعضی از شخصیت‌ها منکر زیارت جامعه کبیره، توسل، استغاثه به ائمه یا تشکیک در میراث روایی شیعی، دعوت به اسلام قرآن محور، حسبنا کتاب الله، بله، و روایات صحیح میکنن و اینها میان میگن دعای توسل سند معتبری ندارد، استغاثه به معصوم یا مهدی ادرکنی یا وجیها عند الله شرک در عبارته.
And you can see his opinion, his research-based assessment of Du'a Tawassul. Ayatollah Shaykh Muhammad Hadi Yusuf al-Gharawi clearly labels Du'a Tawassul as a man-made fabrication. He excludes it from his refined compilation of du'as and ziyarat, which he has entitled Minhaj al-Hayat fil Ad'iyya wa Ziyarat. And he even refuses to call Du'a Tawassul a du'a, because he says du'a is what you direct to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's basically when a slave supplicates to Allah. It is when you invoke the imams, that is not a supplication, that's not dua. And he actually calls it a clear-cut example of fabrication. If we can go to the next slide. And then he also gives proofs, academic proofs for why it is a fabrication. The sequential and chronological mention of the names of the imams. And this is a bit technical. Perhaps we can explain it some other time, because I can imagine many of the lay people will not understand why sequential mention of the names of the imams is considered to be one of the clearest proofs that a text is a fabricated text, because obviously the imams were never in a position to disclose these names to the level that they would reach, the public in such a way that they would be recited in a supplication. But in any case, that's a different discussion. He then goes on to, speculate about how this could possibly be the composition of Shaykh Nasiruddin Tusi. He basically calls reciting this dua a mistake, which provides ammunition to the Salafis to criticize Shi'ism. And then he presents the correct definition of dua, which is that dua is when a slave calls out and supplicates to Allah, not when you supplicate to ghairullah. When you supplicate to ghairullah, that is basically shirk, that is basically ghulu, that is unauthorized and forbidden in Islam. So you should not be using a sacred term like dua to refer to a practice that is basically borderline shirk, if not shirk itself. So this is a great Ayatullah. If we can have the next slide. The good thing is he's based in Qum. Okay, that's his image right there, mashallah, as you can see. Nurani face right there. Very high level, high ranking, senior level mujtahid in the Hawza Ilmiya of Qum. And so you don't even have to, basically it's very cost effective. You don't have to invest money on tickets, invite people, provide accommodation. He's already living in Qum. And mashallah, he is contributing with his encyclopedia. He has an entire encyclopedia on Islamic history. He has books on hadith and rijal and all of that. You can see these are his books, mashallah, beautiful books. Mawsu'atul Tarikh al-Islami in 3 volumes. Min Tarikh al-Hadith, he's written a beautiful history of hadith. He's very familiar with the concept of fabrication and the phenomenon of fabrication and what the ghulat did and all of that. He has this book on the role of women in Jahiliyyah and Islam, a contrastive study. So he's a prolific author, and he recently also delivered a series at Michigan University. So you can see his knowledge is not only being shared in the Hawza of Qum, but rather the West looks up to him as a scholar who has research to share, which is of benefit. So we would propose that he would be someone very good to have a munazara, and I hope it doesn't come to a mubahala, because his evidences are very clear, and once you study his research and his work, you will, I think even the traditional side would be forced to realize that this is not something you would want to do mubahala over, because he's also, as you can see, he's not a Wahhabi or a Salafi or someone. He's actually concerned about the image of the Shia school, and his main problem with Du'at Tawassul is that it gives ammunition to anti-Shia sects to label the Shias as people of shirk and bid'ah and ghulu and all of that kind of stuff, you see. So he's a well-wisher of the school, he's within the school, a prominent scholar of the school of Ahlul Bayt, and the best thing is he's based in Qum, so he's just, you know, a taxi ride away.
Okay, all right. So why wouldn't it be a better idea for the Qumi scholars to actually reach out to the scholars in their own neighborhood, as you say? But so another famous name that comes, you know, to my mind, international media, and of course, especially the World Reformist Studies, is Ayatullah Sayyid Kamal al-Haidari. He is a prominent mujtahid and an established marja taqleed, and someone who has, you know, courageously called for reform in the host areas. Wouldn't you agree that the traditionalist side would greatly benefit to engage him?
Yeah, I'm going to plead the Fifth Amendment on that. Perhaps Sayyid Misam, who's the insider, he can shed some light on why we have not nominated Ayatullah Sayyid Kamal al-Haidari, despite the fact that he's a much more prominent mujtahid, marji' taqleed, and someone who has greatly contributed to reformist and revivalist discourses in the recent period.
Let's give the floor to Sayyid Misam then.
I would just give a small answer because, as you know, I'm driving right now. I'm on a border. I need to show some documents. The short answer is that Sayyid Kamal al-Haidari, after exposing a few things from the establishment, he's been put under house arrest. So, and his office has been closed. So now he's not even able to deliver his Dars al-Kharij lectures or anything. So he's under house arrest now.
Right. So what you're trying to tell me is they've placed, I don't know who they are, but so, okay. Let me
so it's very surprising that they are actually inviting someone from India or Tanzania or another country to come to Iran and have a debate.
من باز دارم عرض میکنم این رو من از طرف حوزه علمیه قم اعلام میکنم شما هر روزی اعلام برای مناظره کنید ما در حوزه علمیه قم یک فردی که مناسب با شما باشد تناسب علمی با شما داشته باشد معین میکنیم برای مناظره و گفتگوی علمی 1 جلسه 2 جلسه 10 جلسه کمتر و بیشتر هزینه ایاب و ذهاب اسکانتون هم بنده شخصا متقبل میشوم.
While they have prolific scholars there within Iran who have like non-traditional views, but they've put those scholars under house arrest rather than having a debate with them and a dialogue with them. So this is surprising.
I mean, isn't this, I mean, allowing somebody to speak publicly, isn't it a form of intellectual cowardice? Because, I mean, you're avoiding engagement with him. I mean, shouldn't they be debating with him in public, and should they be refuting with him academically if they feel that he has something wrong to say, instead of resorting to such tactics? I mean, I find it a little bit odd that, I mean, this is happening in a country that says that they follow the rules and laws of the Ahlul Bayt. So a gag order is okay?
So this is why their friendly invitation is not very believable, because even if you look at the video, when he starts the video, in the beginning, he compares us to the Wahhabis and Ibn Taymiyyah. So I mean, what kind of a friendly invitation is this, where you start by comparing your opponent to Wahhabis and Ibn Taymiyyah? That was surprising. And when he goes further, he tries to give the example of Firaun and Prophet Musa alayhi salam. And then he stops for a few seconds because he realizes that he's actually in the place of Firaun, because he gives the example that, when Hazrat Musa came to Firaun, Firaun said that you're trying to change our religion. And he was warning the people that, this Musa is trying to change our religion, the religion of our forefathers. But that's exactly what Ayatullah Qazwini himself was saying a few minutes ago, that these reformers, they are trying to change our religion. They are trying to, reform our sect. So he pauses for a few seconds because I think he realized that this example is not very apt for this situation. So that was a funny part in the video.
فرعون میخواد با حضرت موسی مبارزه کنه، میگه انی اخاف ان یبدل دینکم، من میتونم حضرت موسی بیاد دین شما را به هم بزند. ببینید آقا ابن تیمیه را به عنوان مصلح معرفی میکنن، رشید رضا میشه مصلح، محمد عبده میشه مصلح.
So yeah, I mean, that's all I can say right now. Maybe Sayyid Alihur can add more.
Right. Yeah, so basically what I would say is that I don't think they would be willing to engage high-level scholars of the level of Ayatullah Sayyid Kamal al-Haidari, for example, or even Ayatullah Shaykh Muhammad Hadi Yusuf al-Gharawi, or even if they would engage them, they would do it behind closed doors. Because if a proper, moderated, free and frank debate is held between these two sides, I just don't see how the traditional side will be able to hold its ground. A lot of things that they would not want to emerge and come out would basically emerge. A lot of the things that are suppressed and that they wouldn't want the public finding out, the public would actually find out through such a debate. And so that's why I don't think it would be good. The only reason why I think they're interested in inviting the reformists from Canada and the UK, for example, or perhaps even India, is because they assume that these I don't think they have actually engaged with the content of those reformists. So they probably think these reformists are just some, little kids who probably haven't studied their Shiism. They don't know what's there in the books. They're completely clueless. And so they'll just invite them over and impress them with their, evidences and this and that. And it's going to be a, very easy, they're just going to walk over them. That's what they feel. I think even if they were to actually find out how solidly well-equipped the reformists, even in Canada and the UK, are in terms of their arguments and evidence and deep study of the school, I think the moment they find out how well-versed these scholars are, I don't think they would be willing to engage anymore. Because usually the traditional side is only prepared to engage under circumstances where they're sure that they will be able to get the public to believe in their narrative. Wherever it's a free and fair exchange, they don't do very well. And I actually have a book. So a lot of people are saying there should be engagement. Well, actually, there's already been engagement. We have a whole book that we showcased during the Ghulu series, and we could showcase again as well. It's Ta'liqat. It's basically a book in which they have published a proper debate that took place between Ayatullah Sayyid Muhammad Hussain Fadlullah as a representative of the revivalist side, reviving the actual teaching of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, and the traditional representative from the Hawza of Qom, who is Ayatollah Shaykh al-Mirza Jawad al-Tabrizi, who is also, like Sayyid Fadullah, a student of Sayyid al-Khuyb, but he supports the traditional side. And there was a proper exchange between these two mujtahids. And if you see that book, and inshallah we presented snippets from it, inshallah, if we get the opportunity, we can present the whole book, we can get it translated, and the audience will get to see how roundly and thoroughly Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Hussain Fadlullah refuted all the traditionalist positions, and how they were completely unable to respond and counter his arguments with anything that would even have the resemblance of something that is convincing evidence. So I think in light of all these bitter experiences, I'm not saying the traditional side will never engage. They would only be willing to engage in a circumstance where they can do the necessary damage control and they can prevent, stuff from getting out that they don't want to get out to the public.
So when was this debate held?
This was way back. Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Fadullah passed away in 2011. So this is way before that. It was in the form of an exchange between Ayatollah Jawad Tabrizi and Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Fadullah on Wilayat Takwiniya, on Istighatha, on supernatural station of Imams. All of these issues were discussed, and we even presented quotations way back in the Ghulu series from this book.
So this wasn't recorded in any way. There's just a book.
Yeah, it's published basically. It's transcripts that were published, and they have both sides. You can hear both voices and see representation of both the reformist side, the revivalist side, as well as the traditional side. So it's not like engagement has not happened. It has happened, and so far it has not worked really well for the traditional side, because any objective reader who reads this book, and I guess right now this will sound just like a claim, but when we actually present the book, you will actually see how roundly Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Hussain Fadullah refuted. Now, obviously, some of my Qummi friends say, well, it was not a fair, it was not a fair matchup, because Ayatollah Al-Mirza Jawad Tabrizi is a good faqih. He's good in bahth of, tahara and najasa and all of these other fiqhi usuli issues, but he's not, good at, his strong point is not exactly tafsir al-Quran. Whereas Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Hussain Fadullah actually had a 24-volume tafsir of Quran to his credit. So he was very, he had the upper hand in the tafsiri. Whenever they got to tafsir or ayat of the Quran, Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Hussain Fadullah was clearly, his hujjah was very ironclad. So they were saying it was not fair, but I don't know, the audience can judge.
But clarify this, was this debate not discussed beforehand? Was it just a one-off thing? Didn't the people, didn't the traditionalists think that they needed somebody who would be able to be, a little bit well-versed? Because, sometimes, if you as a reformist are coming in, revivalists are coming in, you've got your evidences, you've got everything sorted out, and the other person might not have these answers. So, how is it that it wasn't fair?
Right, I can explain. So what happens is basically, it's just like, you've had COVID-19, right? Doctors around the world have dealt with certain strains. So when a new strain emerges, they have that overconfidence whereby they think that, this is basically something we've dealt with. They don't realize it's something completely different from what you've. So the problem with the traditional side is that they specialize in dealing with only one sect, and that is the Wahhabis. So the Wahhabis have been calling, and the Salafis, I should say, the Salafis have been trying to argue for a certain kind of reform and revival on their side. Mm-hmm. And so what the traditionalist side specializes in is in silencing the Salafis and in demolishing their arguments. Now, Salafis, their arguments, to be honest, for the kind of reform and revival that they want to bring about, their arguments are not very rock solid. Why? Because Salafis have unfortunately deprived themselves of the rich legacy and intellectual heritage of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wassalam. That legacy is absolutely essential if you want to return to the real Islam and the real Tawheed. No one can teach Tawheed in this ummah like the Ahlul Bayt. And the Salafis, unfortunately, they refused and they ignored that beautiful heritage of Ahlul Bayt about Tawheed. And as a result, they made up arguments from their own mind, misinterpreting certain verses of the Quran, misapplying them, and verses that verses that are not about a certain issue, they're using it for that issue. So the traditional Shia scholars are able to silence them and refute them very easily. They assumed that when there was talk of revival within the school of Ahlul Bayt, they made this assumption that these people are influenced by the Wahhabis.
الان ما می‌بینیم بعضی از افرادی که در گروه شیعه هستند دارن یک سری شبهاتی مطرح میکنن، همون شبهاتی که وهابیت 700-800 سال دارن مطرح میکنن.
They didn't realize that every talk of revival and reform within the school of Ahlul Bayt is not based on the legacy of Ibn Taymiyyah or Ibn Abdul Wahhab. It is based on the legacy of Ahlul Bayt. You see, we are promoting the concept of Tawheed as given to us and transmitted by the Ahlul Bayt alayhim. Now I agree that school has been buried by the fabrications of the Ghulat, but the school is still there in the books. So when the reformist and revivalist side brings evidences from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim assalam themselves, that is when the traditionalists are dumbstruck and they don't know what to do with those. And so they try to argue. Either they will say, well, this is taqiyya, meaning na'udhu billah, Ahlul Bayt, when they're promoting tawheed, they're actually lying and hiding their actual station, wala iyadhu billah. Or they will try to bring some other nonsensical arguments. So this is basically why they haven't really, done well in their arguments with the revivalist side within the school of Ahlul Bayt. Unfortunate thing is that sometimes, while there is a lot of talk about, how those who have logic, those who have evidence, those who have proofs should not be afraid, should not be scared, they should not shy away from engaging with the other side. But when push comes to shove, when it actually comes to the ground realities, we find this is not only in one country or one place. In general, I think, throughout the Islamic world, if you go to see, it is not very easy, unfortunately, to defend a narrative that is not popular in your particular area of influence, right? And that's why you find most of the greatest Islamic intellectuals, unfortunately, find themselves forced to migrate to the West, because the so-called kafir West. Because unfortunately, while the West is kafir in some sense, maybe in the very narrow fiqhi sense, but in some areas it is, it is following Islamic values more. And at least it's allowing. Remember, Islam, the West is secular. It is, let's say, predominantly Christian, and so Islam isn't a very welcome. Islam should be viewed as a threat as far as they're concerned, and indeed there are people there who view it as a threat because of its intellectual power. But at the level of governments, you don't see them suppressing free speech, and you don't see them, suppressing research. In fact, Islamic research is thriving in Western universities, and I think even in the East, it's not all, age of darkness. There are, alhamdulillah, for example, the scholar that we have nominated, the reason why we nominated him is because he's based in the Hawza Ilmiya of mashallah. His research is, even though he's a traditional scholar, but in many areas, he agrees with the revivalist stance. And, they have not cracked down on him. And he's conducting his Bahthul Kharij, his research, he's contributing books, and they're letting him do that. So it's not all... it's not, we can't make blanket generalizations, but there are certain unfortunate instances as well. And I think we should just hope and pray and look forward to a future where, there is this freedom of speech and freedom of inquiry and freedom of research. And, this all of this talk of, banning books, for example, and banning personalities and, placing people under house arrest, all of this, becomes part of history, like today, the West, it laughs at its own history when they remember how they put Galileo under house arrest and how they tried to suppress scientific freedom and scientific researches. They now laugh over this, So I think we also pray for the day when the Islamic world can look back and, laugh over these things and move into the future with the confidence that is befitting and worthy of them.
Talking about moving into the future. So hypothetically, let's say, they decide that they don't want to have the debate with these reformist scholars in the vicinity. We don't live in the era of Peshawar Nights anymore. In our current era of screen sharing and simultaneous translations, would it be easier to have everyone on a Zoom, broadcast this mutual debate live, global presence, of course, without the need of travel, visas and COVID tests and, wasting resources? Wouldn't it be easier if they were to send an email and, a time and a link could be organized?
Absolutely. I think Islaah admins have already put out, if they haven't already put out, I would request them to put out. They have already made a document in which they have put their terms and conditions under which their scholars would be willing to engage and participate in whatever it is that they want. If they want a debate, they want a dialogue, they want a discussion, they want a fireside chat. Because as Sayyid al-Ustad Ali Haidar mentioned at the very beginning, we are one family, you know, and you don't need mubahalas within families, okay?
اگر واقعا ما بر باطل هستیم قطعا خدای عالم عذاب از آسمان میفرسته نابودمون، هیچ اشکالی هم نداره. ما آماده هستیم برای این کاملا. یعنی بنده خودم، زن بچم، تمام نوهام و غیره هم رو میارم اینجا برای مباهله. شما هم هر کس را خواستید بیارید اینجا برای مباهله. نه یک مباهله، هزاران مباهله باشه. والله تالله بالله، قسم به قرآن منزل، قسم به حقانیت رسول الله، بنده حاضر مباهله هستم. دیگه از این بهتر.
We are all school of Ahlul Bayt here. No one supports any other school, at least as far as I'm aware, on this platform. We're all committed to reviving the original Islam as was preached and promoted by the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wassalam. You know, there were 12 conditions, I recall, that were placed in that document. And I think if it had not been for example, our own exigent circumstances, like me personally, for example, my university teaching commitments, my own students here, they keep me so busy. I've been unable to fulfill, with great regret, I've been unable to fulfill actual commitments, binding commitments between me and certain jamaats whom I had to apologize to because of the unforeseeable circumstances that resulted from the COVID pandemic and, you know, exams and, you know, basically our entire university calendar has been messed up as a result of that. So we are reeling under the pressures of this pandemic. And so had it not been for that, I personally myself would have no issue of, you know, contributing whatever I can to such an initiative. Dialogue and engagement is something that's really beautiful, and more of it should be happening. Unfortunately, until now, all that's happened is, you know, mudslinging and name calling and labeling and all of that. So it would be very healthy if they can move away from that. Unfortunately, even in this call for mubahala and munazara, we saw certain unpleasant, you know, jibes and veiled, you know, strikes. But khair, we can overlook those. But yeah, I think what you are proposing is really beautiful. If they are, yani, for some inexplicable reason, they don't want to engage with their own top level mujtahideen and maraji of taqleed who are there in the hawzat of Najaf and Qum, yeah, we would. I think the reformists in the US and the UK and in India as well, I think they wouldn't mind. Although I think they would demand an explanation as to why the real gems who are there in the hawzat of Najaf and Qum, why no engagement with them? Why are they being sidelined? Why are they being marginalized? Why are they not being engaged with? Ultimately, in my assessment and research, I've seen a lot of what the revivalists in the West are presenting is basically translations of researches that have come out from the Hawza Ilmiya of Qum and Najaf. So for example, if they're scared of this ulama abrar theory that's trending these days, a lot of people are, you know, what's ulama abrar? If they want to have a debate on ulama abrar, the ultimate expert authority on it is a product of the Hawza Ilmiya of Qum, as we explained in our lectures, Ayatullah Shaykh Muhsin Kadiwar. And he's a product of the Hawza Ilmiya of Qum. He attained ijtihad in the Hawza of Qum under Grand Ayatullah Hussain Ali Muntaziri. He's written a whole book. And so all you need, he's an alumni, you know, at our university, whenever we invite alumni, they always come back very happily. And, you know, we derive great delight in having them and hosting them and catching up with them. So I think he's an alumni of the Hawza of Qum. If they were to invite him, he would be happy to come and present his theory. Only problem is they have banned his books. They have banned his books. They have banned his discourses. I don't know why. And then, you know, there is this talk that, you know, we want to engage. Your own national assets and treasures you are banning, and you're not giving them the opportunity to even contribute, so much so that they have to migrate and go to other countries. Other countries are welcoming them. So Ayatullah Shaykh Muhsin Kadiwar is a visiting professor in the United States of America. The universities there are, you know, welcoming him. They want to learn from him, benefit from him. He has unique insights on early Shi'ism and what Shi'ism used to look like in the time of the Imams. So, you know, if the ghair is benefiting, the family should benefit even more.
True, very true. Seth, Kamran, you would like to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a small comment on what you originally said was, you know, like a Zoom meeting like that you proposed is like I said before, it's the most convenient for everyone, and it's the most cost effective. And like, it's good that they've made a proposal for dialogue. Dialogue is always, good, and that's always welcome. But I think what's more important is if the intention is actually of free dialogue. Like, if we propose, like, we're proposing the Zoom meeting, which is more convenient for us, which is more doable. If the intention really is dialogue, then there should be no problem with something like a Zoom meeting, because it's a very simple. Anyone can see how easy it is to arrange a Zoom meeting compared to an international flight to a completely different country with everyone's schedules lining up. So I think just a small comment I'm trying to make is just if the intention is dialogue, there should be no trouble with changing the format of this debate, and they should be in. We should try to accommodate in any way we can to have a proper dialogue. I don't think we should be stuck on like they proposed the format. So they're like, no, we can only do it this way. Then it begs the question, then why are you doing it your way? Like, is there some reason behind why you need it to be in your country with your, with your scholars, with your language, for example? I think we just need to have, if the dialogue is with the correct intention, then this Zoom meeting should be the best solution.
Thank you for that. All these perspectives are making me need help with something, because I'm having a difficulty wrapping my mind around. So you have this traditional Hausa establishment that is actively suppressing and gagging freedom of speech and research, and cracking down on the leading reformists within their own ranks. And at the same time, has the audacity and stomach to invite reformers from outside to engage. How does that make sense? I mean, can somebody enlighten me about this?
Yeah, I would say, unfortunately, that's the reason why then invitations like this don't, are not taken seriously by the reformists in the UK and Canada and America and everywhere else, because when they see that the world today is not living in a cave. We're living in a global village. So everyone knows what's happening, around the world. And so in order for your invitation, if you're going to issue an invitation, if you want it to be taken seriously, you need to have certain moral credibility. So if behind the scenes you are actively suppressing research and persecuting reformers and forcing them to leave your country and go to other countries, and then side by side you invite people from other countries, so that becomes a little bit of a crisis of credibility kind of issue, and a trust issue for those on the outside, right? And we don't want the school of Ahlul Bayt to face these kinds of issues, right? So the Imams of Ahlul Bayt used to invite atheists, and atheists used to go to them. Why? Because they were 100% sure that these Imams are not just going to, raise a sword and chop off our heads and say we are kafir and we are this and we are that, or put us in, under arrest. They knew that these Imams are going to listen to us. As Abdul Karim ibn Abil Awja, he reports in the report in Tawheed al-Mufaddal, he says that whenever I went to Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, he never cursed me or abused me or bad-mouthed me. He never ever, even labeled me. He would listen to me for hours. He would listen to me so intently and in such pin-drop silence that I used to start thinking he's actually convinced. I have basically, made my case and I've actually convinced him. And then he says, once I was done presenting all my stuff, he would just lift his head, look at me, and one line response, demolishing my entire foundation. And I would just be, flabbergasted looking at all of this. So you see, these are Imams of Ahlul Bayt. The reason why they could afford to do this is because they had the hujjah. They were fully armed to the teeth with the kitab and the sunnah and logic and evidences. This is how you behave when you are armed to the teeth. But when you are covering up evidence, when you are hiding stuff, when you are, picking and choosing and not presenting the public with the full picture, that's when you actually have reservations and you have, you want to keep it on your own turf and you want to, basically control and manage the whole thing because you fear certain unpleasant aspects of the truth might get out and do damage to your cause.
You know, I find it very, very interesting that, I mean, I look at this like indicating left and turning right, but that's the way I'm looking at it. All right, so the big issue about credibility, okay? A call for engagement would not be taken seriously or be given a proper consideration by the revivalist. And that's really sad because such engagement would be beneficial for the communities and especially those on the fence about these matters. And I think what's happening right now is there are a lot of people who aren't sure if they want to go with the traditionalists or, you know, follow through with the research stuff that the revivalists are giving them. So, I mean, how does one regain moral authority or moral high ground after losing credibility like this?
I would say we can learn from the example of previous religious establishments who fell into the same mistake. I think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has opened the door to tawbah, and tawbah is not just something that applies to individuals. It applies to institutions. It can apply to governments as well. A government can actually do tawbah if it wants to, repent from its past offenses and rectify. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always talks about إِلَّا الَّذِينَ تَابُوا وَأَصْلَحُوا إِلَّا الَّذِينَ تَابُوا وَأَصْلَحُوا. No matter how much you've messed up, no matter how much you've damaged your credibility, your reputation, no matter what you've done, you can always just take a U-turn, do tawbah, repent genuinely, and obviously to show proof of your repentance, you can rectify the wrongs that you've done. If you look at the Roman Catholic Church of today, the modern Vatican, they have tried their level best. You know, they've been besought with so many crises. You know, from you know, their clergy doing stuff that they shouldn't have been doing, to their past excesses against the scientific community, what they did with Galileo, how they burnt Giordano Bruno at the stake, how they ordered the burning of those people who dared to translate the Bible into local European languages. There's a whole book that's been written, that's been authored, the Black Book of the Roman Catholic Church, that showcases and highlights some of the really unconscionable and unimaginable, unbelievable acts of persecution that they unleashed against, you know, those people who are speaking out their conscience and trying to read and study the scripture and revive the actual religion of Isa alayhi salam and all of that. But what did the modern Roman Catholic Church do? They actually repented. Their popes came out. They admitted in the modern period that our treatment of Galileo was wrong. We were in the wrong, and, you know, this is not right. This is not cool. And, you know, whenever they have a crisis, they deal with it and they issue statements signifying their remorse at the excesses that were committed. And while they're still not a perfect institution, but you see, that's the thing about human institutions. They're not perfect, but they are perfectible. So I think we can always start a new chapter. We can always usher in a new era, you know, in history of freedom, of tolerance, of engagement, rather than name calling and labeling and, you know, mudslinging. I think that is always possible. It just needs willpower, and it just needs, you know, things lining up in the right direction.
Looks like we're one step behind every time, huh? I mean, we have to be taught, we have to be told, you know. I remember this because it's something that I've been told, that I think the Arabs needed to know that regardless how majestic and how major some place like Rome was, it actually fell. And I think this needs to be reminded, and only then does it come back to us and say, oh, if they could have fallen, we can fall as well. If they had faltered, we can falter as well. If they repented, we can repent as well. But I don't know. I think there's in we've gotten used to the status quo. We've gotten used to, the comfort zone of being where we are and accept whatever is being told. So even the book that you mentioned, despite the fact that has evidences that are going, contrary to what the traditionalists are saying, the only refute that they can come up with is that it wasn't an equal debate, but rather one was stronger than the other. This has been happening to us, and I think I mentioned this last week as well, that nobody until now has come to say, you guys have said this, but we are refuting and saying, no, this is what is being said, this is what has been written, and you've got it wrong. But they come and, like you say, it's literally taking, it's mudslinging, it's character assassination. So, I mean, yeah, we're being invited to a debate, but nobody has said, let's take step one. This is the reason why we want to invite you to this debate, because what you've said, we are refuting in this particular way, but we are giving you a chance for rebuttal. It's not a chance for rebuttal. It seems like it's a full-on, you come with your guns and, I mean, yeah, it's a battle zone. So
Battle zone.
anyway, I think, today was a little bit slower because we've got less people in this episode. But thank you so much, Sayyid Alihur, and also Kamran for his points during this session. And I really appreciate your time. But yeah, if there is, my son, thank you for switching on your, yes, your points as well, very valid. And thank you for reminding us that, yes, there are, Marja Taqleed and scholars who are in house arrest. And I think they should be a plea for them to be released, for them to go, back and give this knowledge back to their students, or even, people who want to listen and want to understand more. So thank you very much for participating, and inshallah we will see you soon. Yeah, and don't forget to subscribe to ISNAD, because more stuff like this will come out, and as long as you are listening, this gives us motivation to continue making these sort of episodes. So thank you very much, and wassalamu alaikum.